Good morning. Okay, so let's see if we can get the summary going for this session, so that way we can move into our program of the plenary very soon. So again, we're going to be here all day, trying to get it all sorted. So thank you everybody for yesterday's discussion, and also many of us actually had a long day because we went to participate in the premiere screening of the movie, the Lake Superior Hero, and it was fantastic and really great conversation there. So it was appropriate really to learn more about what happened with people around the lake. So we were really quite taken, really appreciated that opportunity to hear and to learn. So I don't think, you're part of the movie. So congratulations as well on the film production. So I think that's a very nice way to communicate our message. And I think the film is actually quite effective. So we actually didn't want to go back. We could have to stay and continue with the conversation. But anyway, so we are here to trying to talk about, it's in the program always that we would do the summary, and what we thought a good summary for yesterday, and also from day one, because this is our last day here, is actually to get more participation from all of you to help think about what we are about and what we are trying to do and what we could do together. So some of you participated in the SSF CAN, which is another initiative, a new initiative, look at putting together a book that has stories about small-scale fisheries across Canada. And you may have enjoyed already a bit of a networking opportunity. I wanted to bring this again as another thing to think about in terms of if you have ideas about what we might want to do together as a network, because TBTI network is global, and you may have heard since day one when Yinji presented the TBTI first Congress, the World Small Scale Fisheries Congress in Japan. She mentioned TBTI Japan. So we have TBTI Global, and then we have country hub, if you like. So we have several country hubs happening already with TBTI Japan is the first one. So SSF CAN, in a sense, is one of the hubs to bring researchers together, and practitioners and government and interest groups and organizations to continue to have conversation about small-scale fisheries in Canada. And perhaps our colleagues in US would like to do the same. So if you are interested in organizing, bringing people together and making the connection, that is really something that we would like to encourage and invite people to do that. Again, nobody sent me anything to summarize, so therefore the only thing I would do is to put what I heard yesterday at the movie. This was a big word for me because the Lake Superior fishing people, that's what they were telling us, that there's a lot that they want to share. And I wonder whether we could do the same in terms of spending whatever 10, 15 minutes we have here, thinking about what you would like to share. And what we have put on the table that you're sitting is actually a little flip chart, right? So you can actually either write down what you wanted to share with the group, or say it verbally. So either way would work. Maybe we'll spend a few minutes first just to think about it. And like I said, the flip chart is there, and then we'll read it off, and then we will collect all of that, and we're trying to put that in a summary. So I should mention a little bit too that usually we do what we call proceedings from the Congress. So the presentations abstract would be put into the proceedings, but we also would write a little summary or synthesis, some kind of synopsis. And this, what you are sharing, will be part of that write-up. And then that will be posted on our website and distributed to the Congress participants, but it would also publicly accessible. The same thing with all the recordings, by the way. So the recordings of all sessions since day one, if you go to the Zoom events platform, you can already view the previous sessions recording. But all of them would also be packaged and put into, will be later posted on TBTI YouTube. So that would be another way to, let other people know about what's taking place here. Okay, so let's spend a few minutes thinking about this. You in your own little table first, if you like. What you'd like to share, okay? Yeah, have good conversation. Let's talk. See if you can write a few words down in the paper as well, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Seems like we are enjoying sharing. I don't know what you've been talking about, dinner last night or breakfast or what we're going to do next, how to get out of this room when the day is getting nicer. But really, good conversation is happening. I hate to break it, but why don't we start hearing from some of you, whatever table would like to share, what is being written or what's being discussed. Go ahead, please grab the mic if you like. Just make sure you speak. Can tech team,
I have
Uriel, can we get microphone moving a little bit, Uriel? Please. Okay. What table wants to say first? The microphone's coming to you. Here we go. First table here with Gerald. Go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. This is not necessarily a reflection of the table, but we'll see. Maybe they'll join on. This is comments, I guess, more for myself, as well as some thoughts and reflections I've had with some people around the room, like Megan. I'll call you out again. But so I just wanted to make some comments about yesterday and some thoughts about some of the things that happened. So I'm sure that there's going to be some other thoughts on what happened yesterday with some of our Indigenous colleagues leaving. And so some things to think about. It was interesting in my mind too that it occurred in a session about governance, because I think it raises important governance questions about how do you engage and how do you acknowledge different groups. And I think we really need to think a bit more and a bit harder about engagement processes. And especially when you're trying to engage across cultures, if you expect for everyone to conform to your cultural norms and practices, that might not be doing enough. So I think we need to recognize that meetings like this are basically built off of academic traditions, right? And academic traditions, if you're not grown up into them, take training to, I mean, I'm first generation academic. It took me a long time to get used to what's considered normal in academia. These are rituals, right? We need to acknowledge that these are rituals that are going to be really foreign and really strange to people who are not used to engaging in these kinds of sessions. And so, and it was interesting. I mean, you could see the response and you could see where we were talking past each other. The complaint from the group was, you didn't invite us, right? And I'm part of the International Organizing Committee, and the way we engage with it is we wait to see who's registered and see who can we bring in to the panel sessions. And so one group is waiting to be invited, and the other group is saying, who's come in and who can we bring in? So we're speaking past each other. We're not engaged. We're not meeting in the middle, right? And I think if for the future, for us and for other meetings, if we want to prioritize Indigenous engagement, we have to think a little bit differently about how to engage. So that's the first thing I'll say. And
are we going to give time for other people? Or you can do
yeah,
briefly?
I'll pass it on. I hope my table agrees here, but that's my reflection on yesterday.
Thank you. Okay. Others? Maybe another table first. We'll just pass it around. Thank you.
Trying to find lessons from other areas is, there are other groups and other sectors of society that are working on the same kinds of problems, even though quite differently. So one thing I would like to mention is the healthcare system. There's something now called patient engagement. It's national, that is, it's with all the provincial governments because it's a provincial view, and but the federal government is on top. They do the funding for it and so on. And what it involves is a structured system whereby volunteers sit in on the decision making. We're there, and I'm part of one of them. There's about 20 or so people in Newfoundland who are part of we're called a patient panel. And we can voluntarily sit in on decision-making processes. And I put that out as a possible model for DFO in their decision-making processes, is to allow people to voluntarily come and sit at the table. And if you're just there, you're not actually deciding, you're not having decision-making authority or anything, but you're there. And that creates knowledge and includes transparency. So I offer that to DFO as a way forward.
Thank you. Interesting example there. Others? Okay, this way. Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks for my table for letting me speak on their behalf. I think I captured a few things in terms of both what we heard over the last couple of days and also some ideas of what we perhaps could do as a network. One of the common themes that we picked up on was the need to integrate transdisciplinary knowledge, getting away from silos. And a related one is that community knowledge doesn't tend to be held in the same esteem as institutional knowledge. So that was one of the takeaways. Another one was the benefit of engaging the people that are affected. For example, small-scale harvesters telling us what their values are, what conservation means to them, what they would like to see in a small-scale fisheries initiative is a better place to start than a top-down approach where you make assumptions. So understanding the values of small-scale harvesters. And to make progress, we need to have all hands on deck: government, communities, academics, industry, First Nations. That's where you're going to see collaboration. And if you don't include any one of those, you're not going to make progress to the same extent. And we ended with a comment on what we called full spectrum sustainability. So utilizing the diverse knowledge from these different groups is one of the biggest challenges that we're faced with, but it is a worthwhile challenge because that's how you get a vision of sustainability that everybody can buy into. Thank you.
Wow, you're having a very serious conversation in that table, which is fantastic. Great point. TD, integrating knowledge, different types you have to acknowledge. Lots of different ways to think about engagement and full spectrum sustainability. Go ahead, please.
Well, my table was Nat Trumbull, University of Connecticut. My table is green, but they did have some ideas. The importance of bringing people together before getting into the governance process. This may take not 100 years like we heard, but maybe 15 to plus years. And this is important for laying the foundation. We were reminded of the communities of practice model, which back to universities have been using for, again, laying the foundation. The point that when you're engaging with fishermen, they will be reluctant. So don't tell them what to do. Ask, pose a problem, and then ask them how to solve it, for example, as a way of engagement. And so, and this may best be summarized by the question of culture, and defined as that which is taught, for example. And so you need to learn the vocabulary, the language, and more formally, this might involve apprentices, things of this nature. Thanks. And to our group, thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of us have done a lot of these community of practice. There's a lot to learn, but I appreciate the point about it does take time. And I guess we need to take the time. Just before I forget, Poppy or Nova, can you check for me whether there's anyone online who might want to, our participants online, if you would like to either say something, we can give you the microphone. And also, or we read off your comments. Next, where's the microphone next? Okay, go ahead, please.
Our group, we also echoing all the other comments we heard from other group members, and I'll keep it short. So I'll try to bring some keywords like active listening, rethink about our approach towards participation, and more inclusive knowledge systems, including Western and non-Western type of knowledge systems. Is it okay to fail and learning by doing? And I have a different idea because we didn't talk about, we are just recovering from COVID, the pandemic period. And I have like issues. I mean, I used to do a lot of field research with fishermen, like community-based type of research. But still, I work in some of the Arctic community and some of the Sri Lankan communities. But because of this, the chaotic situations, I cannot do my research as I used to do. So, I mean, I'm just looking for what kind of like approaches we have to do, going back to our previous like field research life, and we still not there yet. So we cannot do like literature reviews, meta-analysis forever, right? So we need to go back to our normal research life. So it's something came to my mind, and we have more thoughts from Pratip as well.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to reflect on 2 points here. One relates to what happened yesterday, and listening to all the comments, of course, I being part of the international organizing committee, I felt very sorry, but I was restricting myself from acting, because I'm in a different cultural context. Of course, I have been living in Canada for a long time, but culturally and where I feel confident to act in situations like that was not, here yesterday. I was sharing it with some of my colleagues, how I would have reacted if I was on the east coast of India and managed the situations. I just, got stuck to that chair and felt helpless because I didn't know what to do, how to act in a cultural context. And that's our background. And that's what, we all always are confronted in our research. Of course, we have lots to learn from what happened yesterday, but I would propose that we learn together. I don't know what is the way, who works with the group that left yesterday. I would believe that there should be some way to reconnect and learn together with them and mend what happened yesterday. Of course, that would require some energy, some work going forward. But I would be happy to explore and be part of a team if there are confident people that come out and say, okay, let's follow a process and get back in touch and mend the relationships and see how we can learn together and as we go forward. Yeah. So that's what I would like to say. So nothing ends permanently. So let's not what happened yesterday, let's not say, okay, that has happened, we learn and move forward, but let's go back, reflect, and then mend the relationships. The second one is with regards to the series of 5 conferences or congresses that are taking place. Lots of discussion that is taking place is, of course, very contextual here in the North American context. And our colleagues just returned from the Pacific, the Congress in Japan. We should also reflect and try to talk about how at the end of this journey of the 5 congresses, we start to kind of, connect the dots and what we can learn as a combined effort of all these 5 wonderful congresses that are going to take place and where that would lead us in terms of future. So that's one thing we should start kind of, collecting from these individual conferences. Thank you.
So for that, because we have one keyword that we got from Japan, the word is the Asia Pacific Congress theme is called building forward. The keyword from that Congress is building together. So I would challenge you all of you to think about what would be that keyword about this Congress that we can then continue to connect and then make the dots, and then will come up again. You know, there probably would be another, in addition to the proceedings of each Congress, we're probably going to try to come up with something. Some of you may know that, but the Too Big to Ignore partnership actually started 10 years ago. And the process of starting that was similar to what we're doing now. We got together with all the, the various groups of stakeholders, including fishers and fishing organizations, NGOs and academics, and trying to think about what do we want to see in this kind of research network or in this kind of practitioner research science policy interface. So it was at the first Congress in 2010 that many of us got together, and then we wrote based out of that. We did the consultation in 5 regions of the world, and then we put a proposal together, and then we got the Shirk funding, that partnership grant, to create TBTI network. So this is 10 years in running. Of course, Shirk funding ended already 4 years ago, but we are getting other support. And because we have built the network is indeed what runs the project, not anymore the other way around. So I would hope, right, that's what I said about TB. Now we are clustering ourselves in by country because we want to get into the context and really build that kind of capacity and create the kind of network and build a relationship that would help us move in the context that we work with, but then connecting with other networks around the world, and then see how we could together work on elevating the profile, the values, and celebrate the importance of small-scale fisheries around the world. So that has been what we have been driven by, this kind of coming together and really working to achieve this kind of vision. And in all those cases, it's not we alone that coming up with those research questions. Is actually quite the opposite. The research questions that drive TBTI are co-created. So it has been part of the good long consultation and conversation. So it's not like we present a problem and get them to solve. No, we are thinking together about what problems are, because as you can imagine, somebody sees problem one way, another person might see it in a different way. So it's been really rich, enriching also, and empowering for all of us to be part of that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that we can do also for US and Canada, because other regions are doing the same. So it's a great idea to try to connect the dots and continue, because what's happening here should also be connected what's happening elsewhere around the world. So that way we can all move together. It's exactly why we have International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture for that reason, and also the small-scale fisheries guidelines. We just take another couple of minutes, if it's okay with everyone, because I still wonder whether we have more points from other tables quickly. Other tables would like to share? Not double dipping, hang on, let's see what other people have first. Anybody else? If not, then we'll let you, that would be then, if nobody else, then that would be our final comment for now.
Yes, I hadn't had a chance to discuss with people at the table. It's very quick. The federal government has something called Innovation Lab, and it was set up, I think, in the 2010, 12, somewhere around there, and it's been extended for another period, 6, 7, 8 years. And it's a process by which governments who are planning policy change involve people who are going to be affected by that policy change. So that's available to Department of Fisheries and Oceans within their own government.
Okay, thank you. So there's a lot of avenues, there's a lot of mechanisms, there's a lot of, it's going to require a lot of good thinking and process. And that's the thing, right? Because it's there, it's available, we could make aware of it. and use it for good cause. I thought we have some, oh, sorry, someone comments. Can we read it? Because I can't see from here. Can you all give the microphone to Poppy? It doesn't show up here, by the way, so.
And so Susan Higdon on the Zoom Q&A has said, I've been questioning how the general public will be engaged in the changes taking place in the fishing industry. Are there particular ways consumers can meaningfully support small-scale harvesters?
Great, thank you. So that's important, right? Because it just, you know, conversation happens and we have a good time, but where does it go next? Who do we really need to engage? So consumers should be part of this too, and how to do that is a good question. I think we have some examples of that, like what Skipper Otter is doing and others people too, I'm sure. Okay, we're gonna collect, we're gonna put this paper on the wall for everybody. So if you haven't had a chance to put your thought on it yet, so you visit the paper on the wall during lunch and just continue to add your thoughts on that. That would be great. We have a sticky note, yellow note, so don't, you can write with your pen as long as it's not gonna bleed on the wall, then I have to pay for it later. So use the yellow sticky note if you don't mind. And just post more thoughts on that. We're gonna continue to collect it throughout the day, because on the final panel, we would come back to, well, we are in this format, but it's gonna be again open for many people to say whatever you like to say, especially think about what's next, okay? All right, I'm taking too much time, sorry about that, but we would move to, can I get the next slide, please? Okay. This is what we go next. I would actually like to invite session chairs for this, which would be Josh and Gerald. You can take it from here. Thank you very much.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Gerald Singh. I'm with Memorial University and here to present our fifth plenary here on food, fishing, and visions for the blue economy. So our session is about the blue economy. You may have heard the term. You might not know exactly what it means. I think for a number of people, it's a kind of source of inspiration and or confusion. And this session is, we're very lucky. We have members from both the Canadian government and the American government here to talk about current thinking about blue economy and kind of the respective countries, and we're going to have a nice discussion around blue economy. Before we begin, though, I do want to acknowledge that we are on traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups here in Newfoundland, including the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit people. Something I think to always reflect on. It's something that can be a cheap throwaway line to do these land acknowledgements. It's worthwhile taking the right kind of reflection for it. So I hope we all do a good job for that. But to get into the session today, again, just to be very upfront with our session, again, reflecting on everything. We do not have an Indigenous person on the panel. We did look for it, but again, given the way our planning processes worked out, it wasn't really possible. But we do have quite an extensive Q&A period during the session. We hope to have a essentially kind of expanded panel, including everyone here. So we do want to include everyone's voices. But before we get into that, we do want to have reflections from our government partners here to talk about Canada and American perspectives on blue economy. So I'll quickly introduce our speakers to do that. First up, we're going to have Robert Pascal, who's the Senior Director with the Blue Economy Strategy Secretariat at Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Robert has worked with DFO since 2010, so has some experience with fisheries issues. And I won't belabor it too much more. I'll let Robert come up, introduce himself more if he wants to, and introduce his talk.
Thank you, Gerald, and wanted to just say appreciate the acknowledgement of the traditional lands that we're on. I think we all share in that acknowledgement. All right. So as Gerald mentioned, I'm the Senior Director, principally responsible for development of Canada's Blue Economy Strategy. It's a strategy that is currently under development, so not in place yet, but can speak a little bit about where the federal government is thinking about blue economy issues and some of the directions we're going in, and perhaps provide a bit more context around blue economy in general and what that means from our perspective. Slides to work. Okay, so Gerald didn't provide a definition of blue economy, and I think he did that on purpose because there seems to be many different ones, and we tend to go with the definition that the World Bank provides. I like to go with that because I think it's sort of the most concise, and it really is that coming together of thinking about how do we sustainably use the resources the oceans provide us for a number of different integrated objectives, whether it's growth, whether it's livelihoods of individuals, whether we, and not stated there specifically, we think about it from the cultural and social importance that oceans provide our communities, and equally as much around doing so in a way that supports the health of our ocean ecosystems. And not just from a sort of maintenance level, but from a restoration, regeneration perspective as well. Apologize for the super condensed slide here, but to note that for our Minister Murray, she's been mandated to develop a blue economy strategy for Canada. This is a whole of government strategy, so she's working with a number of her colleagues and I am with other federal departments such as Natural Resource Canada, Transport Canada, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, the regional development agencies, the various Indigenous departments, environment, climate change, the list goes on and on, truly a whole of government effort. And a lot of where this comes from sort of stems from the international sphere. Canada is a signatory to and a member of something called the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. It's a group of 14, 15 like-minded nations who have as one of their key deliverables the development of sustainable ocean plans for their nations. So Canada's blue economy is actually, we're working off of a pretty strong base, a number of diverse sectors, of course, for this audience, fisheries, but aquaculture as well, marine energy, ports, shipping, marine tourism, all form the blue economy. So, we look at all of that together when we sort of think about this. A lot of emerging sectors in areas such as like carbon capture, use and sequestration, ocean tech that actually provides innovative solutions across all of the various sectors, of which Canada has significant strengths in things like ocean robotics and ocean sensing. Important to note, we obviously the line of Canada's the longest coastline in the world. We have tremendous aquatic resources and aquatic ecosystems. We have research institutes and already a strong industrial base, regulatory frameworks that exist, a lot of things to sort of build off of in terms of where our blue economy is. Equally important to note the regional differences that exist as well, and the regional importance that the blue economy plays. if we think about in Atlantic Canada context, about 6.5% of the Canadian population, 19% of Canada's blue economy is Atlantic Canadian based. Also to note that, there's a strong role for our inland waters too within the context of the blue economy in terms of things like supply chains. We think about getting a lot of Canadian products to market globally through the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway as an example, and how, having to think about how that plays in. Listed a few, we call them emerging trends, but and this is not an exhaustive list of part of the blue economy conversation, but some of the newer thinking of, topics and ideas we have to think through in this very complex, large space of what the blue economy is. And so, an example we put up there around maritime autonomous surface ships. I always have a hard time with that acronym, but I think that's more emblematic of the fact that the importance of innovation, the importance of technology, these advanced technologies that are all becoming more and more pervasive, not just in ocean economy sectors, but in really all industrial sectors. And that we have to think about how those get factored in and how we can support the development there. List here around green alternative fuels. Another way to say that climate change is an important lens in which we look at the blue economy and the role of climate change in the oceans. How do we decarbonize industries? This government has a policy objective of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Starting to think about how and what that might mean for small scale fishers is part of the conversation. So is the concept around so-called blue foods and this idea of how does protein from the sea, whether it's fisheries based, aquaculture based, play into concepts around food security. How do we maximize in a world in which stock sizes are not necessarily growing, right? And our fisheries are often fully subscribed, right? How do we get the most out of the biomass that we, pull out of the sea? How do we sustainably operate our aquaculture facilities? All of that are big pieces. And, marine spatial planning as a tool to look at all of these uses at the same time. Where do we do them? When do we do them? How do we ensure that communities are part of those conversations? Are all big topic ideas that we have to think through. So why a strategy? There's a lot of different reasons. And I think, someone mentioned earlier in the remarks, we're coming out of COVID period and a need to sort of build back better as the frame. But how do we look at the stock of the situation and look at how we can advance coming out of the pandemic and how can we do things the right way? There's expected to be tremendous amount of growth in the blue economy, up to 4 trillion Canadian by 2030 was sort of the number that gets bounded around. If you think there's some statistics that will show that if you look at the ocean economy globally, it would rank as the 7th largest economy in the world. If you just look at all the activity that takes place in the ocean. So it's quite a significant opportunity that takes place there. Other countries are doing a lot of work, and we'll hear from colleagues from the US on some of what they're doing in their spaces. But from a competitive advantage, and Canada needs to work in order to sort of advance its its position as well. So. And last thing here is that we haven't had an ocean strategy in Canada, a new one since 2002. So that's quite a long time. And of course, what we're trying to do here, think through is really, looking at biodiversity loss and change within our oceans, climate change as real policy issues that need to be addressed, while also looking at how technology and innovation can help sustain a lot of the challenges that we have ahead of us. The fact that the population keeps growing and the demand for fish and seafood will keep growing with it. So a lot of gaps that we see a strategy could help address, and mention some of these, what's taking place in our environment and the costs that puts on the livelihoods that we can generate from the sea in sustainable long-term ways, lack of investment and innovation, the need to ensure that our industries are technology forward, the fact that there are new areas of ocean use and ensuring that we have regulatory certainty to help enable those, and in areas where there's uncertainty about operations or how we can operate, to make these things clear. Data and making sure that groups have the information necessary to draw and drive their operations in sustainable ways, as examples. And I think I understand was raised in other conversations in the last few days, a lack of labor and skills in fisheries, but in all maritime sectors is a real gap. It's probably a real gap, to be honest, outside of just the blue economy, the ocean economy, but something that we'll have to look at moving forward. As part of the development of the blue economy strategy, we did extensive engagement last year, and heard a lot from Canadians. And I'll speak a bit to the specific things we heard from fishers in the next slide. But key points that were raised, the two top ones were actually the importance of data and knowledge, and doing our best to share that, to integrate that, and share that it's insatiable, the desire for more ocean-based information. And then the other was around labor and the need for skills and training, and address challenges around youth participation, challenges around intergenerational transfer, things of that nature. Of course, the role and importance of climate change, the need to ensure that it's not about the trade-off between environment and economy, but how these two concepts come and can be integrated together. Increased desire for Indigenous participation. And when we heard about that, it wasn't just about participating to have more sort of economic opportunities, but it's being more involved in all aspects of what the blue economy represents in a really holistic way, as it is specific to individual communities and their particular desires for what they want to achieve for their communities. And of course, Canada continue to act as a good player on the global stage. Addressing issues in particular, i.e. fishing, is something that Canada has I think, a good, strong reputation globally, and it's something that we should double down on. Specific to what we heard from fishing groups, clearly that fishing is remains the backbone for coastal communities in Canada, like a concept that needs to remain at the forefront, and that policies such as owner-operator and fleet separation are key policies that should need to be sort of there, strengthened, and it remains sort of central to that. The importance or the ability for, and desire, I should say, for fishing groups to contribute to the science conversation that takes place, and how there's a desire for more collaboration around the data that fishers have with respect to, and how that can contribute to fisheries management decision making. And a need to start to think about how to drive greater and greater technology incorporation into fishing operations, including how do we start to think about decarbonizing fishing operations? How can we become more and better use data and information to help drive those on-water operations to increase not just sustainability outcomes, but efficiency and economic outcomes as well. So as we, work hard to elaborate what the strategy will be, all of this, engagement and analysis, is distilled into some principles that we're trying to think through and keep in the back of our minds as we do that hard work to develop the strategy. And one is, and it'll seem like a kind of simple or even dumb statement for, I think, this crowd, that Canada is an ocean nation, but I think we have to remember, right, that not everybody lives on the coast. We don't always think of ourselves in that context first across the entirety of the country, and it's important to ensure that there is that literacy around the benefits of what the Canadian oceans provide, what our ocean sectors provide. The need to, again, to integrate both the economy and environment. My boss likes to say that the health of the ocean is like table stakes. It's something that's a given and the foundation of which, if we don't have that, then being able to do the work to ensure that we have sustainable generational livelihoods coming out of our ocean sectors, we won't achieve. So we have to think of these two concepts not as from a perspective of trade-offs, but the perspective of how are they mutually supportive of one another. This is going to be a federal strategy. There's federal areas of domain, provincial areas of domain, yes, but we're going to focus first on areas the federal government can control. Certainly, we want to ensure that the benefits of the blue economy accrue to as many groups as possible. There's underrepresentation amongst, the conversation around Indigenous peoples within the context of the last few days, yes, but also women and other underrepresented groups, and how do we look to ensure that these benefits accrue in as wide and diverse way as we can. And lastly, a one-size-fits-all strategy does not make sense for Canada. The context in the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Arctic are so uniquely different that we need to take that into account. What communities themselves, aquaculture is probably the best example for this, and we looked at what's going on within the West Coast around finfish aquaculture, different desires perhaps here on the East Coast in that domain, taking a look at and ensuring that we're not, that we're not taking, if we don't take those differences into account, I don't think this strategy will sort of go too far. And it's one of my ACOA colleagues likes to say, the strategy will live in the regions, will live here as opposed to, in Ottawa. So we want to ensure that that's kind of how it comes out. So I think with that, I've probably gone over my time, but I'll turn it back over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Robert. And don't worry too much about reminding us Canada's an ocean nation. I'm originally from Alberta, so sometimes I need the reminder. So next up, we're going to have Sarah Schoeffler. So Sarah is a Seafood Strategy National Liaison with NOAA Fisheries. Sarah's worked with NOAA for over a decade on international science and policy issues. So again, someone who very familiar with what's going on in policy in the oceans.
Morning, thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction. I'm actually going to start talking to you by bragging a little bit. As was mentioned, I work for NOAA Fisheries. I work for NOAA's headquarters office, and I currently have what I think is the best job in the agency. My job, a large part of it, is talking to, and more importantly, listening to people in the seafood sector to understand the challenges and risks they face and identify ways, partnerships, collaborations, innovative technologies that the agency can engage in to better address these challenges. And my path to getting here was a long one. As I mentioned, I've worked in international fisheries science for a long, long time. I've actually worked with this agency in one capacity or another since 1999. So that's a long time. But the work I was doing was fairly distant from what I was really interested in, which is feeding people and understanding where my food comes from. And almost 10 years ago at this point, I started looking at seafood in my town, which is San Diego, and asking why I couldn't find local seafood in the places where I shopped. And that led to connections with fishermen locally, like Pete Helmay, who's on this panel, also nationally and a bit internationally too, and hearing stories about tight margins in which they operate, the expansive skill sets they need in order to run a successful business, and the challenges they face in regulations, with climate change, et cetera. For example, the challenge to start a market in San Diego where fishermen could sell direct to the public, or the impact that the development of San Diego's working waterfront may have on industry, or challenges in other regions like the consolidation due to catch shares. Many of these things we've talked about this week already. And I also started connecting to researchers engaged in this kind of work, like Patricia Pinto da Silva, who I saw and hear, Josh Stoll, and I read their papers on the disconnect between fish as food and how seafood is managed in the US and the many pathways of seafood marketing. I saw how researchers were documenting the information that I was pulling from these interactions with people in the seafood sector, and in a way that could be used to improve the system. I started to see a role for myself in this kind of work in the agency. And I began to provide information back to the seafood sector. For example, I convinced a few colleagues of mine to work with me on a preliminary economic analysis of San Diego's commercial fisheries. And this information was used by the port, the proposed developers of the downtown working waterfront, and industry to understand the value of commercial fisheries in San Diego and the need to maintain areas zoned for it, even in the face of redevelopment. We know the demise of working waterfronts is happening across the country, across the world, right? And through good fortune, I was able to connect with Patricia and Josh and someone at the US Department of Agriculture on this idea of a benchmark survey of commercial harvesters engaged in direct marketing. And with the addition of Sahir Advani on this team, who you may have heard speak about this project yesterday, we have a dream team, and it also consists of our colleagues across the agency and quite a few people in USDA. So it's really a thrill to be a part of. It's something that, as I mentioned, across our agency, folks are interested in, and also our leadership is interested in. And I believe that the reason that the leadership in our agency asked me to be in the role that I'm in now is because of the knowledge that I've gained from small scale fisheries through these connections, like those that happen here, and also the implications that the challenges and risks have on small scale fisheries are not contained only to small scale fisheries. And of course, I still have much to learn. So at this point, now I'm in this new position for me. It's newer for the agency. I'm the Seafood Strategy National Liaison. I work with the Senior Advisor for Seafood Strategy in the agency. And he's listed on my front slide there. And a lot of what we do is listen to the seafood sector and understand what's needed and figure out ways that the agency can best support the seafood sector, from processors to dealers to marketers. And I appreciate all the knowledge that you've shared this week on small scale fisheries, and I guarantee it'll be put to good use. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about the national strategy for seafood sector resilience and competitiveness that we're currently working on in NOAA Fisheries, which is it's not just Michael and me working on it. We have a team, and we also consult with thought leaders across our agency, as well as outside of the agency with industry itself. And I'll tell you a bit about that. How do I move this? There we go. So produce responsibly as it is in the US, seafood is good for people, the economy, and the planet. You all know this. Seafood, wild and farm, is one of the best sources of nutrients, essential for human well-being. In the US, wild capture and farmed seafood yielded about 9 billion pounds of seafood in 2020. About 80% of that was consumable. About 30–40% is exported on an annual basis. And of course, like Canada, I understand, we import about 90% of what we eat, and approximately half, or probably more than half, is from aquaculture. So the seafood sector is not only critical to our food system. It supported 1.2 million jobs and generated about $165 billion in sales in seafood across the broader economy in 2018. And further, seafood is critical, which you all know, to food sovereignty, security, and its integral culture in many communities. Yet the seafood sector in the US and elsewhere on shore is facing unprecedented concurrent challenges. Market and trade disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic and now the Ukraine war, accelerated changes in ocean conditions due to climate change, causing rapid changes in species location, size, composition, the potential effect of new technologies like offshore wind on the use of ocean space, and labor shortages, along with aging harvest, processing, and distribution infrastructure. Okay, as you all know, in 2020, things changed. The world turned upside down. Measures to reduce the spread of the coronavirus upended our industry. Seafood struggled to find buyers. People, not just in the US, obviously were out of work, and millions of additional people in the US became food insecure. Trade and shipping was disrupted. In short, it was no bueno for the seafood industry. So we have a NOAA produced a report on the impacts of COVID, and the title and a link to that report is at the bottom. If you want it later, let me know. And these are a few of the highlights. In short, the report provides a snapshot of the effects of COVID-19 on the seafood industry. So from commercial harvesters, aquaculture, seafood dealers and processors, and the for-hire sector in 2020. In short, the analysis identified a significant and sustained contraction in the commercial fishing sector. So these COVID disruptions really serve to highlight systemic issues that we in NOAA have been identifying through conversations and with the seafood sector, and of course the broad experience and knowledge of folks in our agency. We talked about a lot of these this week. You guys know these, but they range from weaknesses in the global supply chain, low value of US seafood, labor shortages, lack of information on price and landings data for US produced seafood, consolidation, competing ocean uses, and of course, climate change. So as I mentioned, Michael and I and others have talked to the industry, and these are a lot of the challenges that they identified in interviews that we had with them. And this is work that Michael started well before the pandemic, probably 4 or 5 years ago in an official capacity. And of course, climate change will persist and will continue to increase storms and like the impacts of, perturbations like COVID. It's not going away. Skip that one. So considering the importance of seafood in food security, culture, economy, what would be an objective, or what are the objectives of a seafood strategy? Well, of course, it's to maintain and restore seafood, fish stocks, seafood stocks, and species conservation, right? Of course, we want to increase the value of catch for fishermen, so either increasing harvest and dock price of US seafood, managing the maximum economic yield, ensuring US market access and export opportunities. We also want to increase seafood production, whether it's through aquaculture, underused quota and species, or by more use of processed trimmings. We want to increase jobs and resilience of coastal communities and put domestic seafood back on US plates. I want to find US seafood harvested in my neighborhood, in my local stores. But we also want affordable seafood, particularly for disadvantaged communities. And we want to maintain and enhance food subsistence, and as well as tribal fisheries catch. So with these kind of objectives in mind that we heard from the seafood sector itself, we're endeavoring to create this national strategy for seafood sector resilience and competitiveness. The strategy will capture what the agency could do or should do given current capabilities and authorities over the next 5 or so years to support seafood sector resilience and competitiveness. As I mentioned, we saw extensive input dating back years, and we have shared a draft outline with a number of a diverse group of stakeholders in industry through roundtables, through town halls. We've consulted with we have a Marine Advisory Commission. We've done tribal consultations, and I'll pause there to say we have more work to do in that area. And eventually, right now we're working on a full draft that will eventually be shared for public input. The draft strategy focuses on the seafood part of our portfolio, including wild capture and aquaculture. And it covers not only our work to manage fisheries and produce seafood responsibly based on sound science, it identifies strategies for supporting markets for US seafood. It's one of a suite of strategies that our agency is engaged in. We have, and it'll work in concert with an equity environmental justice strategy, a climate science strategy, which is meant to improve data for addressing climate impacts, and it'll also be used in concert with guidance for incorporating traditional ecological knowledge into decision-making. So there are 4 goals, and I'm sure I'm going long on time to badly quote Mark Twain. I would have said less, but I ran out of time to prepare. So wild capture fisheries, we want to optimize sustainable production of US wild capture seafood. This covers the bulk of what you think of our agency does. This is the science and the management that we do, including in international fisheries. We're going to continue to do that work. It's important to how we manage fisheries. It's needed for sustainable fisheries. It includes things like strategies for the blue economy. So understanding the impacts of competing ocean uses like wind on the seafood sector. It also includes strategies for habitat restoration in support of fisheries. In aquaculture, the goal is to increase domestic aquaculture production and establish the US as a global leader in aquaculture production. So this covers what we'll do in aquaculture. Given a growing population, we're going to need aquaculture because harvest from wild capture in the US at least is pretty maxed out. There's not a lot of room to catch more fish. We have a growing population. And in fact, our population doesn't consume as much seafood as is recommended at this point anyway. So it's also worth pointing out that growth in aquaculture is anticipated to be gradual, science-based, diverse, so small and large scale endeavors, and regionally appropriate. The strategies involve aquaculture opportunity areas, so identify areas suitable for aquaculture in federal and state waters. We have 2 right now. It'll involve all the aquaculture science, so research and development, and also understanding and mitigating the impacts of aquaculture on the environment, and also establishing clear, efficient regulatory framework and research and development to grow aquaculture and coordinate this work across the appropriate federal agencies. In international trade, the goal is fair, reciprocal, sustainable seafood trade. So the strategies here are intended to address illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, a strategy for export of our product, and also strategies for monitoring our imports. And this one is probably one that's most personally of interest to me. And this is this goal is strengthening the entire seafood sector through collaborative marketing, infrastructure modernization, and workforce development. So this will involve a lot of partnerships to promote US and communicate the sustainability and nutritive value of US seafood, address the aging infrastructure, and address workforce issues via training programs, connections with US Department of Agriculture, plus socioeconomic market research on direct markets, the value of providing price information in securing investments in industry, the impacts of regulations on industry and communities that some of my colleagues have already talked about the work they do in that area this week, the impacts of new ocean uses, challenges in food equity, social vulnerability indices, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, much of this work and some of the other work that we do and will do can't be done alone. This goal essentially covers the role of government when fish hits the docks. NIMS has evaluated biological limits and will continue to do stock assessments and manage fisheries. But what is our role beyond that? What is our role in supporting communities, jobs, access, in understanding where seafood goes, who handles it, who's eating it, and the broader impacts of climate change, perturbations like COVID, not to mention the impacts of fisheries policies themselves. The seafood sector has posed these questions, and we are listening. The strategy is meant to open the door to these questions in part and help us explore and possibly expand our role and partnerships in addressing these issues. I see this as a really exciting opportunity to slightly shift the course of the vessel that is the work that our agency does. And if you haven't guessed it, I'm actually really thrilled to be part of this work. If you have questions about the strategy that didn't answer today, or we don't answer during the panel, or if you want to be notified when it is available for public comment, please feel free to reach out.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Josh Stoll, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Marine Sciences. And the University of Maine is based on Marsh Island, which is part of the unceded territory of the Penobscot people. Before I kick off this panel, I just want to thank everyone for the discussion over the last 2 days. It's really sort of furthered my thinking about Indigenous sovereignty and really challenged my thinking, and I appreciate that. Thank you both for your wonderful talks, and I'm thrilled to be on stage with a number of thought leaders in this space who will be talking more about this sort of fuzzy space of blue economy and what it means to all of us in different ways. The structure of our panel is pretty simple. We've had this opportunity to hear two federal government perspectives on blue economy, one sort of at sort of the system level, and one zooming in on seafood systems and seafood marketing in particular. Our next panelists have the opportunity to reflect on what they heard and to share some of their own perspectives from their work. And then we hope to create and have time for a discussion with those of you who are in the room. And so there's a panel of 3 people here, but consider it an extended panel of everyone in the room. And so what we're asking is that each panelist spend a few minutes reflecting from their own vantage point on what they heard, and bring in their own experiences to create context to thinking about the blue economy within small-scale fisheries and community-based fisheries. Our first panelist is Charlie Mather, who's a professor in the Department of Geography at Memorial University, and his work focuses on social license and aquaculture. Charlie, the floor is yours. Is it working?
Hello?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. Thanks very much, Josh and Gerald, for organizing the session, and for the 2 presenters. Just to introduce myself, I know many people here, but I've met lots of new people, and I'm happy to do that. But just to introduce myself to those who I don't know, as Josh said, I'm Charlie Mather. I work in the geography department at Memorial University, and just acknowledge that Memorial University has a number of different campuses that are situated on the traditional territories of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, the Inuit, and the Innu. And I just want to acknowledge where we work. I also go by the pronouns he and him. So I've been working for a little while on aquaculture in Canada, and so my comments emerge out of that particular sector. So they are quite situated. As I go through the discussion, I hope to have that the comments I make have kind of broader purchase around questions of the blue economy. Okay, so I work on aquaculture. I don't obviously represent aquaculture. I think in the presentation that, or at least the email that I got from Gerald, it said representing aquaculture. I don't represent the industry. I work and research on the industry. And just to give you a little bit of context for aquaculture in Canada, it's not a very diverse sector, to be honest. It's 80% of the value of aquaculture in Canada comes from salmon. If you include trout, then we're up to 90%. So it's not a very diverse sector. And for lots of various reasons that Canadians would know and people outside of the sector might know, outside of Canada might know too, the industry has been under siege for a very long period of time, right? So in BC right now, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans is now deciding on whether to extend a bunch of licenses. A bunch of licenses have already been discontinued, and now there's a lot of discussion around shifting onto land. There are similar problems in Atlantic Canada. There is perhaps not as much protest against salmon aquaculture, but a significant amount of protest. And also, having had a significant number of environmental, which can only be called disasters, right? So in 2019, on the south coast of Newfoundland, 2.3 million fish died due to what was apparently warming waters, but in fact was probably due to a number of different production-related problems. Okay, so the industry, for a bunch of reasons, is under siege. Now, the blue economy for this particular sector has been seen as a massive opportunity. And in fact, the industry has already released its own blue economy document. So in 2020, so almost 2 years ago, it released a document called Blue Economy to 2040. So while the federal government is in the process of developing a blue economy process, which I think should take time, they are already setting the agenda. They see themselves playing a key role in terms of feeding the planet, in terms of providing jobs, in terms of sustaining communities. And at the same time, there's a lot of kind of discussion in that document around exploiting untapped resources, seizing the podium, establishing Canada as a leader in a context where apparently we've been lagging behind. And I don't know about that lagging behind argument, because in some of the presentations I heard yesterday, it sounded as if Canada's ocean economy was doing extremely well. So there's a kind of frontier mentality that's going on within these documents around the ways in which the blue economy is being articulated and the way in which the industry sees itself as seizing this particular opportunity. Okay, so I think there's a number of risks in the way this narrative is unfolding, and particularly the way in which they've taken the initiative to sort of, in a sense, somewhat hijack the process in a context where the federal government is taking a more longer-term consultative approach. So one of the risks, I think, is that it allows the industry to wipe the slate clean. So in other words, we don't really have to think about what's happened in the past. What we're doing is now claiming that, yes, we can provide jobs, yes, we can feed the planet, yes, we can sustain coastal communities, yes, we can produce a sustainable industry, when in fact their track record, and this is to be charitable, is uneven in doing that, right? I could speak a little bit about the issue around feeding the planet. We're unlikely to feed the planet using salmon, and the literature on food security is very clear that food insecurity challenges are really a problem of access. So if you want to address food insecurity, you need to pay people more, increase the minimum wage, for example. Okay, so that's the first risk, is this issue around wiping the slate clean. The second risk, I think, is that it sort of crowds out more progressive approaches to the blue economy. And I certainly am very hopeful about the blue economy strategy that will eventually come out of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, that will not be crowded out by an agenda that already appears to be set. So, and what I'm concerned about, what will be crowded out, is more progressive ideas that center communities, that really prioritize equity and addressing equity challenges, that prioritize justice, that prioritize good jobs in thriving coastal communities. I think it also crowds out opportunities for addressing what we might call environmental, social, and political ruin. So one of the problems about a strategy that is always forward-looking is that it then doesn't address some of the problems of the past. So if you have a strategy that is only about realizing and exploiting untapped resources, what you're forgetting is some of the impacts that the existing blue economy has had on people and on the environment. And I think a key strategy that the blue economy needs to do is to think about restitution, reconciliation, and addressing what, again, we might call capitalist ruin. So in that context, then, I think that there's a massive opportunity for the blue economy to not be a kind of cookie cutter policy that comes out of another country that we can then just sort of put into this particular context. I really think we need a made for approach that really then addresses the kind of critical elements that we face here in this country, and that isn't necessarily hijacked by private sector interests, and does look forward as much as it looks to the past. Thank you.
We are going to argue about this. Or...
I was just going to introduce you.
Oh, me?
But you can introduce yourself if you want, Pete.
Go ahead. You'll say much nicer.
Pete is a grumpy fisherman from San Diego that I've known for a decade. He's also the president of the San Diego Fishermen's Working Group, and really a thought leader in commercial fishing and small scale community-based fishing in the US. That's all my introduction, Pete. So the floor is yours.
That's more than what I would say. I was going to play a song. Can we do that? Because I was pretty lazy and they told me you have 10 hours to speak, so I have a 4-minute song. 4-minute song, I'm usually planning for 6 minutes. This is a song about the cod collapse many, many years ago, and how a singer thought about it and described it very, very well.
How still lies the bay in the light western airs, which blow from the crimson horizon. Once more we tack home with a dry empty home. Say again, if the breeze is so fair. She's a kindly deep islander, old but still sound, but so lost in the long white shadow. Making break and make do. The sharks so cute that she won't be replaced should she founder. It's so hard not to think of before the big war, when the cod went so cheap but so plenty. Foreign trawlers go by now with long seeing eyes, leaving on where we seldom drink many. When the young folk don't stay with the fisherman's way, long ago they all flew to the sea. And the ones left behind, those tired and blind, and look for a town or a penny. In make and break harbor, the boats are so new, too many are hold up and run. Most houses stand empty, old nets hung to dry, are blown away, lost and forgotten. Now I can see the big draggers have stirred up the bay, leaving lobster traps smashed on the bar. And they think it don't pay to respect the old ways, and great men are forgotten, for we still keep our time to the turn of the tide. This boat that I built with my father still lifts to the sky. One longer and I still got my gold frame on the water. In the big and great harbor, the boats are so few, too many are pulled up and drowned. Those houses stand empty, old nets hung to dry, are blown away, lost and forgotten. In big and great harbor, the boats are so few, too many are pulled up and rotten. Those houses stand empty, old nets hung to dry, are blown away, lost and forgotten.
You know, that's the saddest love song I've ever heard. A friend of mine, Dr. Ray Hilborn from the University of Washington, sent this to me many years ago. And the lesson here was you should have listened to the small scale fishermen. They told you what was going on, and you didn't have the ability. There were too many of them, and they spoke with all these different voices. You couldn't hear them. That song was written about something that was happened 5 years before. And it was written 10 years before the fishery was closed. The small scale fishermen saw the problem and nobody listened to them. And the fishery closed much after. By that time, the small boats were gone and the next generation of fishermen was gone. So there was a disaster and it went to the next generation. Anyhow, when I'm coming to Newfoundland, I was reminded of this because it allows me as a commercial fisherman from San Diego to say that I understand problems here, which are completely different than my problems. My problems are that we have 140 fishermen in a city of 3 million people. Our economic clout is completely unimportant. You could close the whole fishery and the community probably wouldn't miss us, except for food security, culture, and heritage. That's what we keep talking about and arguing about all the time. Because if you say we bring in 6 million pounds of fish, that itself isn't adequate. It's important for us and important for our community, and the rest of the community is finding out that it's important for them to get their fish locally. To be independent of bringing in exports is a big deal. I have another slide I'd like to show. And this slide is about a $3 billion, a $3 billion development that's being put exactly where the fishing harbor is. And they said they're going to leave it intact, but surround us with a Disneyland. And so whether we can get it in or out, I don't know. And across the street, there's a $2 billion project that's started. So right around us, there's $5 billion going to be spent on huge buildings and so on. In terms of blue economy, there's going to be 300,000 square feet of office space that they weren't allowed to put on the water, except now they call it blue technology, which allows them the thing to put it on the water, which again, as we negotiate our way through it, we keep the few 5 acres or so that we have and try to build it up, because the processing plant is going to be gone. We're going to have to replace it and so on. And if we don't keep it right there in the heart of the city, if we move it outside somewhere where people don't have to look at it, that's like my crazy uncle that we keep in the basement and don't show him to anybody because we're ashamed of him. And I don't think the city should be ashamed of this. So working harbor in the middle of all the office workers gives us about 5,000 new customers across the street. As far as I'm concerned. So let's get on to blue economy. And I got blinders on. I don't see it. Sarah Schulfer, I don't think of her as a bureaucrat. She's a great friend and an ally in many of the works that we do. So my hat's off to her with that. And the last thing I want to do is say anything bad about the agency that she works for, which limits my talk. Anyhow, when I look at the blue economy, all I see is a fishing grounds. To me, those are fishing grounds. We fishermen tend to use the possessive pronoun a lot. My fishing grounds. We say that. And even another fisherman that I don't know comes in there. So what the hell is he doing here? He belongs 20 miles away. But anyhow. And I prepared these notes and I wish I could read them. And so we have these fishing grounds, and now more uses are being placed on the same fishing grounds. And then on the other side are the environmentalist group that said, let's close 30%. Let's use 15% for aquaculture. Let's use 20% for things. And pretty soon your fishing grounds are shrinking. So to expect that you could extract the same number of fish from 10 or 20% of the fishing grounds is wrong. So now we got trade-offs. You're gonna have to trade off. You're gonna get less of this and more of that and so on. And I'm really afraid that our voice isn't quite as powerful as a multi-million-dollar corporation who brings their lawyers and we have these multi-million lawyers here and let's bring Pete Halmy up and he'll negotiate with them. And unfortunately, negotiation has been we want to cut off 4 of your fingers. And we say, no, don't cut off 4, only cut off 3. Well, what I have learned is if you're going to negotiate, if you want to cut off 4 fingers, I'll cut off 2 of yours, you cut off 2 of mine, we'll have 4 fingers. And that's how we'll negotiate, because everybody has to give up something. Don't just say the fishermen have to give it up and everybody else gets more of it. But the thing I want to remind, not so much you guys, but my fellow fishermen, is say, don't do these things in my neighborhood. Do it in somebody else's neighborhood. That's not going to work. We all have to meet together and say, if I don't like it in my neighborhood, it'll be just as bad in somebody else's neighborhood. So we should all I should look at what's happening here, what's happening in Maine, what's happening in Florida, because sooner or later it'll come to my backyard. And so this NIMBY idea should go out the window, and we should really concentrate on doing stuff. So since I used up most of my talking time with playing music, as I always do, you see, and when we talk about all these new shiny objects are going to reduce fishing. And that's bad enough by itself, but it's going to destroy fishing communities. And that's a disaster. As the song says, that goes on generationally. That you say, let's have an apprenticeship program for a fishery that we're trying to get rid of. That doesn't make any sense. So for me to persuade young people to get into the fishery, I got to show them promise. I got to show them that fishery will be good and exist at least as good or better. And that's my mission in life, is to make sure that fishery doesn't end with us old farts, but continues in the next generation.
Thank you, Pete. Our next panelist is Chris Milley. Chris is an adjunct professor in the Marine Affairs program at Dalhousie University and brings 30 years of experience working on planning integrated marine resource development and management projects with experience in the Caribbean, Central America, and with Indigenous communities across Canada. Chris.
Hi, actually I have a consulting company called Nexus Coastal Resource Management, which is working with the governments of Nunavut, the Iqaluit settlement region. I used to be executive director of the Mi'kmaq Fish and Wildlife Commission before getting my company going. And I set up the Caribbean Fisheries Management Mechanism back in the 1980s and 90s and worked for a number of years there. And now I'm working down there again. In fact, it's hard to follow you. That's not fair. One of the things that we're doing is working with the government of Canada, the Canadian High Commission in Jamaica, to organize a symposium on blue economy in the Caribbean for the countries that the Canadian High Commission in Jamaica is accredited to. So that's the Cayman Islands, Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and Jamaica. And we're also bringing in Antigua and Barbuda because I'm working on their blue economy plan now as part of the reconstruction of Barbuda from Hurricane Irma. And it's interesting how that even in all of these initiatives, blue economy is the new brand. Blue brand is the new brand in Canada, and everybody's the leader. No offense to the BFO, and I'm quite involved politically. And, I've had a chance to talk to the ministers directly. We're having a strategy to develop a strategy on something that we don't know what it is. Because we haven't defined what we mean by blue economy. We haven't defined what we mean by co-management yet, and we're still moving on from that. And I think we really need to stop and ask ourselves, what do we want in the future? And that, I think you've answered. COVID taught us one thing: economic resilience is much more important than economic efficiency. Big fleets catching fish to export around the world ends up with a lot of rotting fish at their breakdown in the value chain. Small scale fisheries supplying food for the population promotes economic resilience, it promotes food security, and surplus can bring in the added revenue. And that's something we can't lose sight of. Another just comment about Canada's blue economy strategy is that we can talk to all the people in Atlantic Canada, but there's still more votes in 905 than, as Goody Hutchins says. 902 and 709 have less votes than 905. And in the Canadian political process, that defines what the economic priorities are. So we have to really step back and say, where do we make the decisions? We make them at the voting group. We have to educate other Canadians about what's important for Atlantic Canadians, Pacific Canadians, and Arctic Canadians. The moratorium on oil and gas is not popular in Nunavut. They want to have the moratorium lifted so that they can make the decision to not have oil and gas, not to let Toronto dictate not having oil and gas. That's part of the whole Indigenous rights movement. We get to have a say, is what they're saying. Right now, good intentions are actually creating disempowerment. I know we've had lots of conversations around the issues of reconciliation. And I think that blue economy and the advancement of the blue economy strategy, we have to take the step forward. Instead of talking about Indigenous participation, we have to talk about decolonization of how we manage. And I thank Ian Stewart for introducing me to Angela Tallbear. Angela Tallbear has put the idea of, I'd heard the term decolonization, and what does it mean? What does it mean? Everybody uses it. And she put it in context. Reconciliation is a kinder, gentler colonization. It's, we're sorry, but you're going to do it in our system. Decolonization is recognizing the value and the merit of independent governance systems working together. Indigenous governance systems dealing with Indigenous nations, controlled by Indigenous nations, working in parallel and with the Canadian governance system. And if we start to take that approach to the blue economy, we will have livelihood fisheries that are managed by Indigenous nations, that meet Indigenous nations' objectives, that are built on the same principles that our fathers and our grandfathers ran their fishery. And that's something we have to look at in our blue economy plan. The I was responsible for the negotiations between the Mi'kmaq and the non-Indigenous fishers when they had a blockade in Yarmouth at the in Marshall. And the people that were on the other side of the table became very good friends with the First Nations. In fact, Bear River's relationship with the Bay of Fundy Fishermen's Association grew out of those negotiations. The fishermen that were at the table then started as small-scale fishers themselves. One of them became, got involved politically, became the provincial minister of fisheries. He started out with a skiff, fishing lobsters and harvesting Irish moss. As the fishery grew and the lobster fishery grew, that became a small boat, 28-foot Cape Island fishery. Now it's a 44-foot, actually 50-foot with a drop stern, 28-foot wide, $1 million vessel to go fishing. The children of the people that were negotiating are the ones who are $1 million in debt before they can drop a trap in the water. They're the ones fighting the livelihood fishery. They don't know what a livelihood fishery is. Their fathers did, because that's what Nova Scotians had. And we forgot that. That song, Make and Break Harbor, is perfect for the whole decolonization strategy.
And he told me that he plays that for his students a long time ago.
When I always start class, and Holly's here, she can remember, I'll start class with music. And that's one of the songs that I always play. The music is part of our blue economy. In fact, proof, every year we have the Stan Rogers Festival in Nova Scotia. People come down and they sing sea shanties and all the bands come together. That's part of our blue economy. Well, hopefully last point is that moving forward, the consultations and governments do not consult well. They can't, because they carry the power, with them. And people, when you're talking to somebody, it's like a parent talking to a child. You can't negotiate. The child knows you're going to call the shots anyway. The same thing with government. People do not trust the government. And we, even those that have worked in government, don't trust government. Because government isn't the individuals we're talking to. It's this amorphous group that's out there that control our lives. That's the sense of it. We have to allow the government has to allow the negotiations and the engagement to take place across sectors. The issues of marine space, when we were doing work for the tidal energy projects, at the same time we were working on MPAs, we were talking to the same fishermen and same First Nations. And they were the ones who pointed out, it's not about that we're against MPAs. It's not about that we're against oil and gas. It's not about we're against tidal energy. We're against being squeezed out of our own place. And that's the important part of the other aspect of blue economy, is that blue economy and marine spatial planning are two sides of the same coin. One is looking at how we interact to deal with the physical space. And the other is how do we deal with the benefits that come out of that physical space? How does tidal energy contribute to a decarbonized fishery? How does tidal energy contribute to tourism? How does tourism contribute to markets for the tourism that is associated with marine spatial MPAs? How does that tourism support fisheries? Having a new building where people can come in and your new market. MPAs can be a new market for fishermen. And fishermen can get the export price at a local market if you do it selling to tourists. Sorry for rambling.
Thank you, Chris. And why don't we do one more round of applause for the entire panel. I think this session has given us a lot to think about. We heard concepts about opportunity and unlocked potential and technology and food and trade and climate change and aquaculture and planning. And we heard other concepts of branding and resilience and the need for voice and decolonization and questions of power. We want to use the rest of our time today to hear from you and hear your perspectives on blue economy. What pieces of this panel spoke to you, what pieces didn't speak to you, what is missing. So hopefully there are people with microphones. I'm going to start in the back.
So we'll go like this.
We're going to start in the, if it's okay, let's start in the back and then go 1, 2, 3.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentations. They did make me think this question, which is with Blue Economy as a national and an international initiative, how do you scale up the interests and the values of fisheries dependent communities so that they can be accounted for in the distribution of access and benefits? I guess that's sort of a question for everyone on the panel. If there's any idea of how that's been conceptualized.
I think that's a question about ocean literacy. In fact, we spend a lot of our time and energy looking at, I mean, first of all, ocean literacy has become an academic endeavor where academics talk amongst themselves about what ocean literacy means, but we're not talking to the people in the communities. But I think ocean literacy shouldn't focus on the coastal regions of Canada, but should focus on Canada. We talk about putting fisheries and Indigenous issues and the ocean curriculum in schools in Nova Scotia, but ocean curriculum should be in schools across Canada. Because we learn about mining, we learn about the forest industry in Ontario and Nova Scotia. But Nova Scotia, I grew up in Ontario, we never learned a thing about Atlantic Canada, except the fact that all of our families came from Atlantic Canada.
Any other responses?
Well, just quickly, it's a really important question. And it just allows me to reiterate a point that I think needs to be made about the blue economy, which is this problem of loss of access. So what's happened in the ocean economy over the last 30 years is that many people have lost access. And we've heard all of these things. So I think one of the things that the blue economy needs to engage with is the potential for restitution. You know, what would that look like? How do people who've lost access regain access? How do we deal with people who have lost, who have been dispossessed, communities that have been disconnected from the ocean, even though they are on the ocean? And so I think that, you know, making and establishing a blue economy that just doesn't look forward and wipes the slate clean would need to do that.
I think there was a question in the middle table. Oh,
And just to finalize this, don't come to me and say you're going to retrain fishermen for some goddamn job they don't want. No, that's not the solution. That's no solution at all. Especially to an 81-year-old man, you're not going to retrain this son of a bitch ever.
I think what I'd add to, you know, and listening to all the perspectives and the conversation and that question, I mean, you really get a sense of how complex you know, the concept of blue economy is, which, you know, it has certainly made what little hair I've had fall out over the last 3 years in working through these issues. But I think it's part of, you know, that point around Canada hasn't had a single ocean strategy articulated since 2002, and the need to have these types of conversations and to raise these types of questions and have these debates will help bring coherence in some kind of direction that we can kind of collectively move forward with. And that's part of, I think, some of the positive outcomes that will come from the strategy when it's finally articulated. Not to say that we'll probably all agree with all aspects of it, but one of the ways that we do think about what we're doing is trying to create something that's more enduring than something that somebody 20 years from now will say, hey, think we should develop another blue economy strategy or fishery strategy or whatever strategy, so that we can continually reassess where we're at and answer topical and important questions like the one you posed.
I like that question a lot, and it's one I know that a lot of people in our agency and beyond grapple with. So in part, I'm here to listen, and also the development of this strategy, similar to Canada's blue economy strategy. Well, our strategy, I see it as an iterative process. It's not going to be the final end thing that we will live with forever. And it has come about from conversations with industry and across the seafood sector. And those conversations need to continue. People in positions of power need to understand these issues and hear them. So I've been very interested this week in conversations about co-management and participation in these processes. So continuing to explore those opportunities, and hopefully what came across in my presentation was that those of us bureaucrats in government we're humans, reach out, tell us what's going on, and keep forcing the issues and give us ideas.
So my name's Ian Stewart. I just want to ask, one of the things that struck me about the whole blue economy space is that that there's a kind of elephant in the room, and that is that we're focusing on what do we mean by blue economy. And I think that one of the themes that's emerged in this is that what we need to be thinking about is what we mean by economy. So we kind of assume that we all know what economy is, and what we're struggling with is what's a blue economy. And actually, I mean, there's a thread that running through a lot of a lot of things that have been going on this conference as well. And Chris has touched on, a number of other people have touched on it without naming it this way, but also Dean Babington yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? I can't remember. It's all a blur. And I want to thank Megan Bailey for pointing out a paper to me, which is from blue economy to blue communities. Until the question around blue economy centers Main Street instead of Bay Street and Wall Street, we are not going to go forward with these thoughts. Not just from the perspective of this conference, which is small scale fisheries, but in general, we have seen the problem when the notion of economy is defined by Bay Street or Wall Street as opposed to Main Street. That we were getting it backwards, and I think that's we have to start thinking about what we mean by economy rather than obsessing about what's blue about our economy.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say this comes up when you're starting to work across international boundaries, that each country has a different definition of what it means by blue economy. And we see it just within the OECS countries. So some countries, OECS is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. Some countries see the blue economy as a way of extracting profit for their companies. How can we take more? Some countries see it as another quick fix for job creation. We're losing tourism dollars. We got to do something. What can we do to throw people at work and take things out of the ocean? And some look at it as in livelihoods. How can we have diversified dependence on one resource by creating livelihood support for people, and so they can get part of their income from the ocean sector? And not one size fits all. The economy isn't cash. That's the problem, is that because we measure economy and GDP as an indicator of economic success or economic well-being, and we measure those in US dollars usually, people think economy and money. But in economy is the institutions, the education, the health condition, the well-being of the population. That's the economy. And we don't think in terms of dollars and cents when we think about our well-being. We don't think about how much money we have. And a good example of that is actually Grenada, where they've actually had a huge rise in income over the last few years because of tourism development, and their resource sectors have thrived. Health conditions have gone down, and now that the downturn is, they've got an unhealthy population without a way of sustaining their healthcare system. Sound familiar?
So real quickly, if I can add on that, is that I looked at the etymology of economy as this began, and the ecocide is home, household, or place to live. And NAMI is manage. So I think if we think about it as a managing a place to live as different as a place to work, I think that goes to that. My question is real quick, Josh, is that you mentioned at the end of the panel, all of the components that were mentioned about, they're components of a complete system. And it's hard to look at things as a system. Pete, said we have blinders on, each of us has blinders. I wonder, I'm hearkening to a presentation yesterday by Dr. Eddy about ecosystem-based management, where he talked about how he and his team is looking at identifying the approaches to ecosystem-based management, combining it with principles to give kind of a guidebook to look at the issue as a complex system. I think we need a guidebook for this, to get us out, to get that literacy, to be able to have average people have a literacy to be able to approach this and help inform the government in positive ways. Is there such a guidebook?
We'll go. It should have pictures in it if it's a guidebook, because I won't read it.
Actually, Alita Bundy's husband once told me that when you're in Norway and you go to a checkout in a grocery store, people behind the counter will know more about the ocean environment and the fishery on average than the average Atlantic Canadian. And I think that sums up where maybe there isn't a guidebook in North America, but maybe we can start to look at examples of how ocean literacy is promoted in other countries and stop trying to rethink and reinvent, but work collaboratively with others to learn.
Hi, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentations and discussion, and it's got my brain rattling a little bit. And I wanted to go back to this idea of from Robert's presentation about decarbonizing our industries, including the small scale fisheries and all fisheries. And it just had me thinking a lot about, for example, in Canada, you have the federal government that's, has these far reaching ideas and frameworks that they'd like to implement, but then in practice, things are kind of happening backwards sometimes. And I was thinking a lot about decarbonization. And then I was kind of Googling some numbers because I was thinking, well, how much do fisheries, small scale fisheries actually produce in terms of greenhouse gases versus other projects that are being approved right now, like the Bay du Nord project here off the coast of Newfoundland. And just as reference, and again, I just looked these numbers up, so the context I hope is relevant, but a UBC study in 2019 found that all fisheries, marine fisheries across the world produce around 200 million tons of CO2 equivalent greenhouse gases. And the Bay du Nord project is expected to release 400 million tons. And so that's like a global scale versus a regionalized project, I guess. And I don't know if I really have a question, but I'm just wondering if you could, anybody, this isn't just open to one panelist, just comment on, I guess, the hypocrisy sometimes that happens when you're dealing with, a countrywide government that's making decisions, but in practice, in some regions, things are being approved that totally contradict kind of this overarching goal or framework that they're wanting to implement. And the other thought that I had about decarbonizing as well is, we've heard from many people, fishers themselves, that are talking about these different pressures that are placed on them. And I think everyone in the room is relatively supportive of small scale fisheries. So if we talk about decarbonization of our fisheries, for example, here in Canada, what does that look like in practice? And is that another pressure that the small scale fishers need to take on for themselves in terms of modernizing their vessels, looking at new technology, et cetera? But then we have the same government that could potentially be imposing these pressures on small scale fisheries, also saying, well, Bay du Nord, you can come on in and drill in our marine areas. And that's another pressure, again, on our fishing grounds, because that region is so close to so many of our really productive fishing grounds. So I don't know if that's a very direct question, but it's just a lot circling in my head about how we make decisions, how we implement frameworks, and how that plays out in practice.
It's a very direct question, because in San Diego, the APCD has asked us to reduce the the carbon that comes out of the boats, which require repower. It requires repower to engines that haven't been invented yet. The type of engines they're asking us to put in, they don't have them. And yet there's a deadline for coming up to spec in 5 years. Good luck.
Two kind of key thesis there, I think, in your question. The first is on, or that I picked up on, is incoherencies in government policies, and I think those exist all the time. I don't think those go away, but I think by having these having these conversations and looking at developing these strategies, we can do things like look at what existing base of actions we've taken to date. This is a bit of the looking backwards part. For example, significant work around conservation, the Oceans Protection Plan, investments in new ocean technologies through the Ocean Supercluster. Like, there's a lot of work that's happened. Okay, did that all happen independent of each other? In some cases, probably yes. In some cases, no. So do we need to try and tie that all together with what and where we're looking to head directionally, so that we can try and have more coherence in the actions that we take? I think that's, I think yes is what we're trying to do, and that's a bit of what the objective is. It's not a sort of dictation of where things go. It's sort of, looking at the trends and where the priorities are, and sort of trying to be as clear as we can with that. On specifically on decarbonization as a topic, the technology development has already happened, right? There are the super cluster has made investments in one company that's developing electric engines for small scale fishing vessels and medium scale fishing vessels. There's other company, Canadian company, developing coatings for hulls that will make those hulls that much more fuel efficient, thus need less energy for manage operations and such. And so it's not a, and again, it's needing to say, all right, this is an area of importance. What are the steps we're going to, start with, right? Not end with, but like we have to start at a place in order to get to somewhere, and sort of highlighting that these, a desire to have, again, more alignment with broader government priorities that exist, because those priorities aren't going away.
There's another aspect of the decarbonization that I think is going to run into a bit of a number of potholes on the way. One is the distribution grids. We don't have the distribution grids in Atlantic Canada that provide sufficient electricity or capacity to provide electricity to the places where the fishing fleets are going to be located. In Nova Scotia, our grid is not able to provide more electricity into Southwest Nova Scotia, where the fishing fleet is. And that means people come home, plug on their vessels, turn on their stove, start cooking, and the lights go out somewhere else. Right now, the system in Atlantic Canada is quite an intricate web that requires careful management of the distribution. If we change that distribution, we have problems. My son-in-law is the production manager for Maritime Electric and PEI. They're worried about electric cars coming in the summertime because they can't have tourists plugging in their cars the same time that everybody's going home and turning on their air conditioning, which they shouldn't have anyway. And it was just announced in California that even though Canada signed an agreement with electric vehicles for California, they can't keep up with the demand as it is. And they're already starting, I think, brownouts in California. So they're going to be bringing on 2 coal-fired power plants that they had shut down to provide the electricity. So kind of, generating greenhouse gases to provide electricity for cars that are supposed to stop generating greenhouse gases.
Before we turn to more questions live here, there are some questions online. And the first one is a very specific question directed at Sarah, but I think it opens up the larger question that anyone on the panel can also contribute to. So the specific question is around the seafood marketing goals that you presented. And the question is, are the marketing goals specifically for US cod-based seafood or for seafood in general? And so that's a specific one. I think a more general one kind of comments on both plans you presented included aspects of national competitiveness. But how much is potential regional cooperation being considered in blue economy planning or seafood planning? So I'll start with maybe you two, and we'll open it up to the panel.
Can you repeat that second question so I make sure I understand it?
So how
Or
much?
how about I start with the marketing thing and then?
Yeah, sure. Start with the marketing.
Okay, so for marketing, most of the communications and the marketing that our agency does is specific for US seafood. So in large part, the goals are focused on US seafood. We are doing, we are establishing strategies, activities in concert with the broader seafood industry, and that includes processors and dealers who import seafood. So imported seafood is also important to that sector. It's also tends to be less expensive than US caught seafood. So it has currently an important role in feeding US citizens. One that, should we lose it all of a sudden with nothing else happening, that could really have an impact, a significant impact on food security, potentially. So with those things in mind, there is a conversation about how broad the marketing efforts would be. A lot of those would be pre-competitive collaborations, collaborations with others, and coordinated efforts to promote seafood. But for our part, it would be focused on US seafood.
Rob, do you want to?
I think I can answer the second question on regional cooperation. So US recently joined the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, and I know that within that broader construct, there have already been conversations. Mexico is also a member of the panel among the three countries, and looking at where are specific areas within the broader blue economy and some of those themes that the countries can work together to address regional issues. So yes, it's already something that's starting to take place.
To add to what Sarah's saying, Sarah and those people are working from the top down, from the bottom up. Sarah and Kevin joined me here. Our goal is to keep hold of the entire landings of San Diego and sell it as directly as possible. That's our goal, not 5%. Our goal is to sell all of it as close to the people that are there as possible. And to do that, we have to maintain control of it. Some of it will go to the big fish buyers and shipped everywhere, but as much as possible, we want to keep, and with a lot of help from Sarah. In fact, she came as part of people giving this talk, and I told her I wouldn't mention that to anybody so she can go back to her work safely.
There's more questions on the floor here, so we'll take.
I want to go. I think there was a question in the way back first, Alita.
Thank you very much. So Alida Bundy from DFO. I want to come back to this question of language, and we talked about that a bit on day one. It's been mentioned by Ian earlier about what we mean by economy. But I want to talk more about how the way we use language, and both our main speakers use the term leadership, global leadership. If we're truly aiming for, let's call it a sustainable blue economy,
why are we talking about leadership when we should be talking about cooperation, working together to make sure that things are truly sustainable? Leadership speaks to me about competition, about wanting to be up front and not thinking more about how we can achieve multiple goals from a systems perspective, which was also mentioned earlier. I think in presentation, the idea of blue economy starts off on the wrong foot when this kind of language is used. And I just wondered what the panelists thought about that.
Yeah, Adelaide, couldn't agree more. We've been working on the EBM strategy, and she also is very sensitive to language issues. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I mean, the other problems that I see in some of the language is around untapped potential. You know, that we need to get this opportunity going. And again, what it suggests is that we need to extract more, we need to develop more. And again, that's a problem with the kind of language. The other language word that comes up often around the blue economy is the frontier. Frontier is a highly problematic word. It suggests it's connected to colonialism, it's connected to Indigenous extirpation. And so I think I agree 100% with you. The words that we use are incredibly, well, we need to be incredibly careful about the words we use. Yeah, so I really endorse your really perceptive comment, Alida.
When you said language, I thought you were going to object by vulgar language, but if you don't, it's fine by me. You talk about leadership, and my daughter brought me to an orchestra, Philharmonic Orchestra, and I watched in amazement, my mouth open, and my daughter says, "I didn't think you liked music that much." I said, "Music? What music?" I saw 50 people playing different instruments, and they hit every note exactly at the same place. If one of them was 1/10 of a second off, it would sound terrible. My daughter said, "Did you look at the guy in front with the stick?" I said, No. Well, he was showing them when to hit the notes.
I really appreciate the comment about language. It's something that we're always sort of back and forth on. What's the right word to use? How is it going to be perceived? It's the first time I've heard the word leadership be perceived as wanting to be economically out in front of every other place and lead in that kind of competitive way, versus the way we probably typically use leadership in terms of wanting to look at the values in the way that we do things, and wanting to work in exactly what you're saying in collaborative ways with other partners globally to advance those collective issues that we're being guided by things like sustainable development goals and other instruments like that. So we're always kind of looking at that. I really appreciate the sentiment around unlocking potential as, again, being somehow we want to take more and extract more, versus looking about how do we look at our blue economy and how do we do it better, taking all of these concepts around diversity, inclusion, collaboration, technology, innovations. I mean, all of that, right? That is for us, when we think about unlocking our potential, is how we think about it, not necessarily how do we, squeeze out, that much more GDP. All the rest of the growth and the benefit and the value, we believe, comes by having those fundamentals in place, and that'll accrue organically, because we're doing it the right way, ideally.
I just want to add something that not about the leadership and language, but about the word innovation and the use of the word innovation. We often think of the word innovation and technology in the same terms, and we put a lot of money into technological innovation support, COVE, supercluster, OFI. But we should start, and I think we need to start thinking more about social innovation, political innovation, and that'll address some of the issues of reconciliation, decolonization, but also about economic innovation. How can we make better use of the value of what we're already extracting out of the ocean. The elver fishery is a good example. We take elvers, which are very high value, and send them over to Asia where they grow them out. There's a young entrepreneur now who wants to start an elver farm in Nova Scotia that we're supporting, a Mi'kmaq entrepreneur, and we've arranged funding, financial support from a power corporation in Nigeria for him. And they want to get into food security projects around the world. Nigeria's got a pretty strong economy, and they want to diversify. That is going to take a $5,000 value, and it's going to turn it into a $28,000 value in 2 years. That's the kind of innovation we need to start seeing, bringing the same resource and getting better value out of it. We take our timber and send it to a market where they turn it into homes. We take our lobsters and send them live to another place where they turn them into seafood products. We don't do any of that in Atlantic Canada. And I think that's something we need to do more of.
Yeah, we'll turn to another question from online. And this one, I think, again, can be open to anyone. We can get national perspectives even outside of Canada potentially. How will or how can the blue economy model or strategies deal with trade-offs between different sectors and stakeholders and right holders in consultation? So dealing with trade-offs, best ways.
Give more to fishing. It's simple.
It's a prioritization.
I think it depends on whether you want your blue economy strategy to be a series of sectoral strategies in which there's a specific fishery strategy, a specific aquaculture strategy, specific ports strategy, or whether you look at it in a more holistic way. What are the kind of overall priorities, horizontal issues and themes that run across the entire blue economy? What are the key barriers that can be addressed that can create the right environment for sustainable activity to take place? And is that where you, when you have limited ability to act and invest, is that where it's the best way to prioritize that? I think that's how partly you get through some of that challenge. We talked a little bit about marine spatial planning. I think that someone that said sort of the other side of the coin of the blue economy, I can agree with that statement more, because this is how you bring those parties together to exactly have this conversation, which isn't necessarily a national conversation about this sector versus that sector versus the next one, but in a specific geographic location, community driven. What are your priorities? What do you want your the value to come from, and how do you want to consider all of those various concepts that we've talked about today to be best expressed?
I was going to take a stab at responding to that as well, and more from the seafood part of broader blue economy strategy that the Department of Commerce, which is our grandmother, our parent agency, we're deeply embedded in Department of Commerce. So I see the seafood strategy as not so much a series of trade-offs, but a series of yes ands. We need all of the elements, all the goals that I spelled out in there to have a thriving and resilient seafood system in the US. And what is resilient? I think there's been some conversations about that this week, and it's the ability to adapt to changes and perturbations, right? And to go with the flow as things simply change, good, bad, or ugly. we need the science and management to understand what's going on in fisheries and to manage it to sustainably and to the 8 national standards that we have in our overarching mandate. We need communication of the value and sustainability of our fisheries and the basis of the scientific basis of those in order to get better social license, for example, aquaculture. But we need thriving communities to have thriving economies, healthy communities producing seafood, and to have those, we need infrastructure. We need an infrastructure that's not falling apart, and we're not going to get more value for U.S. seafood without people having an understanding of without having seafood literacy, and we won't have the laborers we need if we're not paying enough for seafood and valuing it where we should be. So all of these goals we've outlined to me are yes ands, and they're not so much trade-offs, at least within that strategy. And again, I'm focused more on seafood and not the broader blue economy.
You know, the 300-pound gorilla in the room is, at the end of the day, is there enough room for all of these? And if not, will some of them be diminished in such a way that they won't exist? And that's, in my mind, we have to think of the ocean and so on as finite. And that's a worry. You can't keep adding things to it without worrying where's a place you're going to stop and what will things look like then.
So we are running into our final 5 minutes here. So we don't really have time for more questions necessarily, but I'd like to give the floor to our panelists and speakers. If you have final thoughts, keep it to a minute each, if you can. Pass if you want as well. So Rob, do you want to start on your side?
As a final thought, just to say thank you for the opportunity to come speak here, but to engage in this great discussion and debate. The issues are extraordinarily complicated, and so we can't sort of refine thinking, evolve thinking, be progressive in our thinking if we don't have these types of discussions and back and forth. So I really appreciate all the perspectives that have been brought here today.
Similarly, I appreciate the difficult questions, the challenging questions that you've posed. They're thought-provoking, and I appreciate that. And they'll marinate in my head, and I will definitely bring a lot of these questions back to the folks that I work with on this strategy. So I appreciate that, and also the perspectives of the other panelists, and definitely be taking a look at the Canadian blue economy strategy and some of the other things that I've heard from folks here to see what we can learn from. For example, comment on ocean literacy. Can we learn from what others are doing? Why reinvent the wheel? I think that's a great point, and there are lots of examples out there we can use and learn from. So again, I appreciate the questions and the comments, and for being invited to this panel today.
Yeah, just to say thanks to everyone for all your input. I also enjoyed being on the panel. Yeah, I look forward to further conversations.
Just one last thing about the engagement, and I think it's really important that we don't think of engagement as being a single kind of activity. Engagement's not a meeting. It's not a public open house. It's a lot more than that. And I'm just going to tell a little story about the Halifax Regional Library won an international award for design. And it was done because of the way they did public engagement. They had knitting clubs, they had book clubs, they went out and met with youth programs, they had basketball tournaments, they had writing walls in the city where people would write on what they want their library to be every day, and then they erased it. They had a tree that they were going to have to cut down, and they would hang things from the tree to get people to stop and give comment. It was amazing. It took place for a year before they even got the architect involved. And people gave their vision for what they wanted the library to be. And he took that vision and designed a building around that. That's what we need for the blue economy.
You know, when I first looked at this panel, I see two people from a government agency way over there, and kind of a buffer zone in the middle, and then three people over here critical of what they were talking about. And I thought to myself, is that a good way to set it up? And then next to me sat a gentleman from a completely different background, from a completely different area, and we saw eye to eye on many issues. So what I want to do is get his email and continue this conversation with him. So out of all this observation, who knows if that's the right way to do things or not? I would have preferred being over there where I can elbow them a couple times. That's just me.
All right, so we're now at lunchtime, so we'll call this session to a close. Thank you all for joining.
And now we would let Pete go and elbow Sarah more during lunch and others too. Anyway, so the space for engagement is open, of course, for everyone. We're gonna post the flip chart on the wall. If you feel for it, you can always add more points. Terminology, we wanted to work more on vision for the future. What do you want to see in terms of getting it all right? Thank you very much again, everybody. Enjoy your lunch, and let's be back here for the next session at 1:45.